Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the Product Manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And this is a weekly webinar where we show CI Tools new features. We sometimes look at how to use a tool from scratch, sometimes look at questions people might have about the tools they already have or about new tools that they're considering looking at. And sometimes we go over frequently asked questions about the tools as well. This week we're going to be looking at a couple of tools for from the point of view of why you might want to use them and how they work. We're going to be looking at three of our smaller tools. We're going to look at the time tracker tool. We're going to look at the transformer tool, and we're going to look at the metadata tool. So we'll start with transformer and then we'll move on to the other two after that. But before I start, if you have any questions, please enter those in the chat panel in either YouTube or Vimeo, wherever you're watching this. And I will check on those about halfway through the session, see if I can answer any while we are live. And if not, I'll create follow-up support tickets with you. So enter those in there at any time. I'm going to be working in ArchiCAD 27 for this webinar. The time tracker tool is currently only available in ArchiCAD 27. So if you are interested in that one, you'll need to be on 27. But the metadata and transformer tools are both available back to ArchiCAD 25. So if you're using one of those slightly older versions now, you'll be able to use those tools there also. So I'm going to look at what the tools do, why you might want to use them, and that sort of thing, starting through from the transformer tool. So the transformer tool is for doing one job and one job only, and that is to mirror your entire project. So as you may know, if you've ever been asked or told rather for some reason that you need to mirror your entire project, it is something that's possible to do in ArchiCAD. You can, the method I would generally recommend to do it if you wanted to would be to view the whole project in 3D so that you can mirror all of your stories at the same time. So you would go to 3D, select all of the elements that you have and mirror them about the same point so that you can make sure that you've mirrored everything in exactly the same way, and then drop down into your floor plan views, mirror all of your 2D elements, then go through each other floor plan view, mirroring those as you go, and then go through all your sections, elevations, and that sort of thing, and then make sure all of your layout sheets update as well. So it's definitely possible to do. It just is quite time consuming and not the most fun task to do as well. And as you may know from seeing other webinars of ours, one of the areas that we try to focus on with the tools is making tools that will do the time-consuming and not very interesting tasks for you, and the transformer tool is one of those tools. So there is one thing to choose from here, and then 2 clicks required once you choose it. So we're going to go to our CI Tools menu, we're going to choose Transformer, and we're going to click Mirror Project. And this is where we get our 2 choices. So the first choice is to select the mirror point. You can see it says select the mirror point here. That's the essentially the origin point for the mirror. So this is the point that everything will be mirrored about. So we can click, let's go here, and then we get our second click, which is to select a horizontal or vertical mirror. So hopefully you can see it in the screen share, but as I move my cursor either out or up, or out the other side or down, it switches between mirroring horizontally, so it's drawing a dotted line down here to show that it's mirroring about that line, or a dotted line showing this way to mirror vertically. We move our cursor to the direction that we want, and then we click again to actually do the mirror in that direction. Now what it's going to do, due to a slight issue with the way that interior elevations work, it has to actually open every interior elevation to mirror those for you. So you will see a little slideshow of all your interior elevations, if you have any, as it works through the system, but it will just go ahead and do that for you. So you can see it's mirrored our entire project now. All of our elements have been mirrored. If I go back to the 3D view, you'll see when it generates the 3D view, you'll see that it's facing the other direction now, but otherwise everything is still lining up and still in place. So it's done that part of the job well. It's also mirrored all of the 2D data, so you can see all of our dimensions are still pointing to the things they were before. They're still linked to the things they were before as well. These ones are linked to these columns here, and all of these elements are showing on the right side now, but they're still linked to the things they should be, and you can see that the zones have also been mirrored as well, and the stamps for those. So it's essentially has gone through and done that whole job for us, and it's also gone through and done the sections and elevations as well. So if I open up some of these, let's have a look at the section there. You can see this is what we look like now, and our elevation, got that there. So if I go back in here and I mirror again, and we'll mirror in that axis this time, it'll go through again. We'll see the interior elevations flash before our eyes as we do it again. Okay, and you can see it's done what you would expect it to have done. Everything's mirrored still. If I go into 3D, we'll see that it's facing the other direction in a different way now. So everything is still there and still lines up, and our sections will be mirrored as well now. So you can see it mirrored that section, and the elevation will be mirrored also. So it's done all of that job for us. And if I go back to this section, you'll also see that the 2D elements in here are mirrored as well. So the dimensions going to the door and to the edge of the roof, those are still there. They're still linked to the elements they were part of. Our detail marker that we had on the gutter here is still pointing to the gutter and is still there. And these keynotes that we had pointing to the floor, the window, it looks like, and to the jib over on this side are still there also. So all of the 2D data is preserved and it's moved to the location you would expect it to, but we didn't have to do any of the work. And one of the other advantages of this is that the tool is essentially just doing the job of mirroring everything for you, but it's not putting the project into any sort of situation where it relies on the transformer tool still being here. You could completely delete the transformer tool at this point and the project would not care at all because it's already done the job that it does do. So you don't need to worry about everything having turned into different element types or anything. It's not changing anything about your project except for mirroring it. So that is the transformer tool. It's available from the CI Tools menu under Transformer, and then Mirror Your Project. Before I move on to the next tool, I also just want to mention the reason it's called the Transformer tool is because our idea when we made it was that there are potentially other types of sort of bulk operations that you might want to do like this that aren't just mirroring. So if you can think of any other things like this that you might want it to do, I would love to hear from you. We've had ideas for maybe dragging the entire project or rotating the entire project and that sort of thing. If you can think of anything that would make sense and that would make your life easier because it's a thing you do with any degree of frequency, I would love to hear from you about that because we can build that sort of thing in and make the tool more useful to you. So that's the Transformer tool. The next one I want to look at is the Time Tracker, which we've actually had up here and running for this whole time so far. And what this is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a time tracker. So the intention here is to allow you to keep track of where you're spending your time in your project so that if you, for instance, send out a quote for a certain project and you're assuming certain things like, if I do this job, it's going to take me X amount of hours to do the detailing and Y amount of hours to get the documentation produced or something like that. You can go back afterwards or as a measurement beforehand in a different project, you can measure how long it actually does take you to do those things. So this is a way for you to ensure that what you say you are going to do actually turns out to be what you do. This is not intended to be a way to police either yourself or anyone else in your office as to whether they are spending as much time they should on things or anything like that. It's intended to be a way for you to keep track of yourself, and then you can see areas where maybe you need to either figure out a way of doing that thing faster, or you just need to make it so that next time you do a quote, you allow a certain amount more or less time for certain tasks. So the way that it works is it just sits here as a little floating palette. You can access it from the CI Tools menu under Time Tracker to open that up, and it has a couple of controls on it. It's fairly basic by design because we just want it to be mostly out of your way. You choose what you want to do and then you hit play. So we can go in here and we can choose the job that we're working on. It will show a list of all of the previous job titles that you've entered here, but you can enter your own as well. So you can just type that in here and that will become available as an option, and then you say what task you are doing as well, and again it will show you a list of recently used tasks, or you can enter one here. So we can go like that, and then we just hit the play button and it will start recording the time that we're doing for that. Once you've finished with either this task or this project, just hit the pause button and it becomes available to choose something different. So if you were to move on to a different task now, say you finished drawing cabinets and you want to change to something else, for instance, you can type in the name of the new task and hit play again. If you want to switch to a different project, you can just open the new project, enter a new job title or choose one from the list, and then go ahead and start recording that. So it's very straightforward to do what you want it to do. There's some buttons over to the side here to allow you to edit these lists. If you need to do that, you probably won't need to most of the time, but you can too. So you can edit the name that is there rather than making a new one, or you can delete ones that maybe you didn't want to put in there or that you don't need anymore or something like that. This button here will allow you to select where the file is that it writes out to as well, and you can see the name of that here. It's just writing out to a CSV file. So the reason it does that is simply so that you can put it into any other application that you might be using to track your time. So if you have a different time tracker software, you can import it into there. It's a pretty standard looking CSV format. Or you can just bring it up in Excel and turn it into a pie chart or something, so you can easily see it that way as well. So we've left it quite simplistic so that you can do whatever you need to with that. And the file itself will look, this is the file that I'm working on at the moment, will look roughly like this. So you'll see that each row is a time record. We've got the name of the job at the top, so that's the selected job and the selected task. We've got the start date and the start time, then the elapsed time, so the amount of time you actually did that task for, the name of the project, so in this case it was Webby27 for all of them, but you'll see the name of your ArchiCAD project here, and the ArchiCAD version there. Obviously these last two are just added automatically. They might be useful to you when you're looking at your data afterwards, but for the purposes of importing it into different software or something, you can probably ignore those two. The main ones you'll be interested in are what you were doing on what job and how long you were doing it for. So that's available there. So that is the Time Tracker tool. So again, that's from the CI Tools menu, Time Tracker, open Time Tracker, and that'll open up here. And the last thing I wanted to show today, actually I'll just pause for a second and check and see if we've got any questions. Just a moment. Right, no questions just yet. So yeah, let's move on to the metadata tool. This is actually one of my favorite tools. So here we go, from the CI Tools menu again. Going to go to metadata and show the metadata palette. Now the metadata tool is It's intended to be useful for everyone who uses ArchiCAD, but it's going to in particular be useful to those of you who are either working a lot with making sure that you get your metadata right, particularly useful for people who are working between different applications. Getting that metadata right in your project is very important for that, so it'll be useful to those of you doing that, but also will be very useful to those of you who are BIM managers or just the people looking after making sure that the model is done correctly and that sort of thing. And this is just a way to manage your metadata in a much smoother and easier fashion. So with ArchiCAD, obviously at any time you can select an element, you can open up its settings, and you can go through to classifications and properties here, and you can see all of the classifications and properties that are available. You can make changes to them, add them to different classifications and that sort of thing, and then hit OK and continue on and change different things. You can also access it via the info box, so you can go and find what you want here and then go ahead. The metadata tool essentially just moves all of that out into a floating palette so that you can see it much more easily and work with it just as you move through a project. So it's much easier to see what you're doing. It also has some powerful extra features as well, which we'll look at in just a second. But to start with, the basic functionality is just that you select an element and you'll see the metadata right here. So it's not obstructing your ability to do anything else. You don't have a thing sitting here in the middle of the screen or a dialogue so that you can't actually do anything outside of it. It just sits here nicely, showing you the information and allowing you to change it. So we can go through and we can select a wall, for instance, and we can change the combustible property to true, let's say. And now that we've done that, you'll see that this one here, if I jump into the actual settings, you can see that combustible, if I can find it here, is set to true now. So it's made that change for us. It just makes it on the fly. So we can go through and look at the property data and change the property data in the palette easily by just selecting the element. You can also see that it's doing the same with the classification, so you could change the classifications as well using the bottom part here. So where we get into the really powerful things that you can do is with the use of filtering and selections. So one of the things that is quite nice to be able to do is to be able to grab all of the elements that fit a certain criteria. So let's select all of the elements that we can see at the moment. And you'll see in my metadata palette that we have everything selected, and a lot of these options now have a, on Mac it'll be a triangle, on Windows it'll be a little plus, but you can see that there's a tree available for the information in these. And if I open it out, you'll see that in this case we have we have 82 elements selected, and of those 82, they have a combustible property which is set to undefined, and one of them is set to true. That's the one that we just changed before. So we can easily see how many in our selection fit a certain criteria. We can also narrow that down as well. So there's a couple of ways that we can work with this. We can select the undefined value, and we can press this filter button here, and what that will do is it will drop the selection of everything that doesn't have the setting we selected. So everything selected now, we no longer have a tree on combustible, so that means that everything, the combustible rating is undefined, and we can now do whatever we want with that. So you can easily go through and say, I want to find all of the elements where I haven't set this property yet, and then go and fix them up by going and setting it. So we can set these to combustible, and we'll set that to false on those. So we've now set all 44 elements to have a combustible rating of false on this one. Now we can go back and we can select everything again, and you'll see that the combustible rating, we have 44 set to false and 1 set to true, which is what we wanted. Oh, I've selected a few extra elements this time, so we've got some undefined showing as well, but those were just the ones I missed when I selected it. That's fine. We can also go the other way as well. So rather than selecting a bunch of elements and filtering down to them, we can select one element and select up, as it were. So we can grab one of these walls. It's got a combustible rating of false. I can select combustible false and press this button here to select everything else in this view that matches the thing that I have clicked. So I just hit that button. It'll find every other wall that has the combustible property set to false, and it will select that as well. So you can see we have 44 selected, so all of those have been selected. So this is a very useful tool to allow you to find areas of your project where metadata hasn't been set properly yet, and then go through and fix it really easily just by selecting that part and changing it to what you want. So you could for instance, have a bunch of doors maybe that don't have a fire resistance rating on them. You can see which ones are undefined, and then you can select all of them. So we can say fire rating is undefined. Let's select all of those. In this case, there's a lot of other elements where the fire rating is undefined, so it's select a lot of the project. So we can go further down here. We can say that the classification, we actually only want windows, so we'll select classification window, and we'll filter that, and that further narrows down our selection to only window elements that have the classification, that have the property, fire rating set to undefined. So you can do combinations of property and classification, filtering and selections, as well as differing filtering and selections in here as well. So we could select all of the elements that have the fire resistance set to undefined, but then only select the ones where the accessible rating is set to something else, or in our case combustible. We could say we only want to select the ones where combustible is also undefined. So we filtered that as well, and now we have those elements. So we've got a bunch of windows and doors by the look of it selected, and then we could go through here and say actually I only want the columns, and we can filter again and jump down to only those. So we've got 4 columns left. So those of you who have ever done any work with trying to make sure your metadata is correct, this is exactly the sort of thing this is for. It's for going through and checking that your model is ready to go. The palette will work in any view, excuse me. So you can do this in 3D, which will make it easier to identify in some cases what the area is you're looking for. So again, we can just select an element, select the thing we want to select by. It'll go through and select all of the combustible undefined objects, and then we can narrow down to windows. We'll go through and just select the windows, and we can continue on as we were before in 3D as well, or section or elevation, or whatever makes sense at the time. The other thing that you can do with the metadata tool is that you can do a sort of a batch load of changes to metadata. So you might have, say, an element that you want to create a sort of a standard set of properties that are in it and put that into a whole bunch of different objects. So what we can do is we can turn off the live edit mode here, which will make it so that it's not picking up the settings of what we're looking at automatically. It's only going to do it when we tell it to. So we can select this wall. We can pick up the settings using this eyedropper. This will have replaced the select and filter buttons. You'll have an eyedropper, so we can pick up the properties of that element, and we can deselect now. And now we just have a sort of a shopping trolley almost of things that we have ready to go. And now we can go through and make changes. So we can say, set this one to true, set the thermal transmittance to something, and the sound transmission to something else. So we can build up a sort of a stack of properties that we want to have. And then what we do is we go through and select the elements that we want to apply this to. So we can select a handful of walls. Let's go with those. And then we simply hit the inject button to push all of those properties that we had preset in our palette here into those elements that we select. And when we deselect, now that we've injected, it's still here. So we can make further changes. So we can say, okay, that was that lot of walls. Now we want to do the same with another bunch, but we want to set combustible to true. And then we go back in and we select those additional elements that we wanted. So let's say these walls here, and we're going to inject into there. So that will go through and do that. And now if we turn live edit mode back on again, we can see what we've done. So if we select this wall, you'll see that, oh, that wasn't one of the ones I got. Or it didn't work. I pressed the wrong button. Okay, my apologies everyone. I'm not quite sure what I did wrong there. Let me try that again. Pick up the settings from here. Deselect that. Set combustible to true, and then we'll select this one here, and we will inject. And we'll turn on live edit. And it has worked that time. I'm not quite sure what I did wrong the first time, so this one's false, and that one is true now. Sorry about that. The thing I did the second time, that's how it's supposed to work. I'm not quite sure what I did wrong the first time. I may have pressed the wrong button as we went. Anyway, essentially the idea here is you can build up a kind of a stack of properties and inject those. Obviously, anything that you have set to undefined, it won't override anything that you have in there already. It will just place in those changes that we want. And you can also further narrow down the set as well by selecting parts here and removing them from the sort of the bucket that we have at the moment. So if you have specific properties that you don't want to be injected, just select them and remove them. So that is the metadata tool. And again, that's from the CI Tools menu, metadata, show metadata palette. All right, I'm just going to quickly check for questions again, and then we'll finish up. So if you have any questions, enter those now. All right. So it looks like no additional questions for today. So that is all for me for today. Thanks for coming, everyone. Next week, I haven't decided yet what we'll do next week. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for what we cover next week, please just let me know by emailing nz.support@centralinnovation.com. And if you have any questions about anything we looked at today, you can send them through there as well, and someone in our support team will be able to help you. But thanks for your time, otherwise, everyone, and I will catch you at the next session.